Situation Room, and we are live on Morning Express with CT Mugandu Oko, Eric Latif, myself. I am Trix Ingado, and we have our special guest Wanjiru Gikonya from TISA. Welcome to the show if you're just joining us. But we're taking a look at what's making headlines, and today is the day that we are going crazy about the handshake. It's an anniversary, and therefore this is making huge headlines across board. So some are postulating that it is a con, some are saying it's a lie, some are saying it was relevant. As a reporter who was running around the streets of Nairobi consuming tear gas like I have never thought I would, and seeing people stoning one another, and the palpable tension that was happening in the streets, I feel like that this handshake was necessary just to calm people down. But as far as politically speaking, after that handshake, I'm not too sure that the things that we're doing right now are going to provide a solution. But at the moment, with business stalled, with nobody able to go into to town, and do their normal business, I feel like at the moment, seeing that handshake and Raila Odinga telling his people to just calm down, we're going to find a way forward, I think that was a good thing in the moment. Moving forward after that, not too sure.
What's the position of the opposition, ODM, and even the others right now?
The alleged opposition.
Yeah, because you see, what the Standard is basically saying is Raila is the foremost state apologist today. He speaks to the voice of a shareholder in a co-presidency. The handshake has made nonsense of the notion of political opposition. Is it true that we actually don't have any political opposition right now in terms of deeds and words?
We have opposition
in the political sphere.
We have opposition to the BBI. We have the teams, tanga, kieleweke. There's a sense of opposition, but they're all speaking from under the same roof. But as far as when you look at the real, the essence of an opposition, you're supposed to speak against, or rather, bring to account the actions of the government. Speak out when they're not doing the right thing, call them out when they're not doing the right thing. But as it is right now, I don't think the setup and the merging of what used to be the opposition and the government seems to bring a fertile ground for that sort of healthy, even if it's unhealthy, but just outspokenness against what the government is not doing right, or really pulling the attention of the public or other stakeholders to what is not being done that needs to be done. So as far as that concerned, I think the system, that platform that is there right now is not healthy for that kind of healthy political.
The opposition didn't shake hands. ODM did.
But that was the, perceived opposition, right?
Yes, it is. But you see,
so
the
you still have
opposition
Amani,
was a coalition. Remember?
So
you had
Wiper,
Kalonzo and his outfit, Mudavadi and his outfit.
All under NASA then.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
If you remember the noise that was made, the rumblings that we heard after the Raila Uhuru handshake specifically, because remember, even part of Jubilee didn't shake hands. This handshake was Raila Uhuru.
Yes.
The two.
Let's start there. Now, even the kieleweke to kieleweke fragmentation that we have within Jubilee arose after this handshake.
Yeah.
So it isn't as though the opposition, or what was traditionally known as the opposition, as in NASA, shook hands. No. It's very clear. Uhuru and Raila shook hands.
Yes.
One supposedly represented the government, the other the opposition. But within government, there are people who felt represented by individuals whom we are told are aligned to the DP. Didn't like that handshake. Still don't like it. They like the BBI less. They like the BBI rallies even less. Okay?
Yes.
And then on the other hand, the rumblings in the official opposition have gone down somewhat, because we see there's movement towards, we can work together, sort of like...
we support the government's agenda.
Choir beginning to form. But the opposition never really went anywhere.
Well, at the moment...
Is it as effective as it should be?
At what
as
point?
you'd have expected it to be?
Remember, if we're talking about what happened in 2017, the beef was about that electoral process and the feeling that someone was shortchanged, meaning the results as was indicated and as it was seen to be wasn't so, and it wasn't declared so. The Supreme Court took a nice sanitized perspective, which ended up in cancelling the elections, yes. But if you were to be honest about our elections, let's start going to the basics of even party elections. The problems begin there. They are what Kenyans will call shambolic.
Yep.
Of course.
But I think if what Eric is hearing is, do we hear the voice of the opposition in the manner in which we heard it previously?
Yes, we do. We hear the voice of the opposition supporting the government.
In the manner in which we heard it before the handshake, in terms of agitating for, any kind of change or pointing in a different direction from where they were going.
Like a unified opposition voice.
And the answer to that would be no. That, you don't hear it as loudly, as forcefully as it was before, even from Raila Odinga himself. And you can see that before the handshake, he was,
Then it begs the question. So, in the absence of Raila Odinga, are you in essence saying there's no opposition?
Because
which means that
Raila Odinga is synonymous to opposition.
I want to re-emphasize. My view is that the opposition coalition, opposition parties were not effective prior to the elections. And in fact, the opposition voice or rhetoric came to the fore as we move towards the 2017 elections. But they were not effective in Parliament because of the tyranny of numbers and because of,
there's that and the rest of it.
So if you look at the few times that the opposition came out and spoke on issues that matter to Kenyans prior, and even, after, around the VAT bill, for instance, there was very heated argument. And there, even prior to 2017, there were a few instances when they really came out strongly. But for the most part, they were very ineffective. So I'd like to link that also to the kieleweke, tanga. You have the deputy president who has now come out to challenge the president and yet was elected on a common ticket. This is contrary to the spirit of the Constitution, because what he should properly do is resign, because he is no longer aligned to the policies of the president. So what we are seeing is that political leaders are very indisciplined in this country and do not comply to the law, and we let them do that. And this is the process when, I was trying to unpack what is Stockholm Syndrome. Why are Kenyans wrapped up in all of this? It's because we have been socialized to accept violations of the law. And it happens day by day. So tanga kieleweke, that in itself is, a very unconstitutional situation. Because what properly should have happened, DP should step down, bring his issues and enter into now an opposition, maybe without a seat in government. But he doesn't want to give up his seat in government because he needs to use that seat to campaign.
Plus, power is sweet.
Yeah,
You're not going to give it any. You're
Like
not just going to drop it like that because
some-
somebody has made the suggestion.
Exactly.
So,
So, and then the last point is that if you look at 2007 and 2017, there are lots of similarities. You had rigged elections, you had botched elections with political interference that were driving results in favor of the incumbent. But the way the situation was dealt with was markedly different. In 2007, the agreement or the dialogue to bring peace was within a structured framework, and the issues were very well delineated. In 2017, if you recall, Uhuru for the longest time refused to dialogue because the opposition had genuine issues. The court had actually declared itself. Even the decision on the second election was not a resounding one from the Supreme Court. It was more so to avoid fanning further violence. But Uhuru refused to talk, intransigence. And when they shook hands, there was no framework. So what I would say is that Raila, by breaking coalition ranks and failing to secure a framework around the handshake, or rather failing to enforce, because there was some sort of, they talked about a few things, but failing to secure an effective framework around the handshake really sold out. And what more can we say other than Kenyans felt betrayed, especially half of the country that was expecting to have a just outcome from the process felt betrayed. And BBI has then come as to add insult to injury, continues to muddy the waters and has appropriated our language, has appropriated our issues and churned them and given us, really a lot of nonsense.
In your opinion, how would this framework look like?
Well, the framework at that point would have been around very simply, and how do you do that? Because the president has coercive power. He's got organs of the state. He's got the security at his So
all this talk about institutions being independent is just talk, is it?
No. They are independent constitutionally, but what you're having is systematic violation of the law. Institutions are only as strong as the people who serve them and the people who use them observe the law. Now, when you have the president, when you have the government, when you have the state being the chief violator of the law, the question is, where do you go? And what we are saying is we had pinned our hopes on opposition leader Raila Odinga. At that point, actually, he was working outside of a legal framework because the government, President Uhuru Kenyatta, Jubilee administration, had violated the law.
So you had pinned your hope on Raila in what? In electing him president, or in getting the BBI framework working?
We have a constitution. Exactly, we have a constitution. It mandates that elections should be handled a certain way. That had been violated. The Supreme Court had then made a decision. Then there was a second election that didn't quite go well, and we were there in very grey territory. So what happened was not really a failure of the constitution, but a political failure. So we had a political crisis, and the handshake was a political settlement. The problem is that BBI as a framework for resolving these political problems is inadequate, because the first thing you should have insisted is that there is a legitimacy question around the present administration. And when you have a legitimacy question, you're then saying you need to balance that power. How do you negotiate with a government that is holding all the power?
Maybe that's what the handshake was all about. Yeah. It was just about accepting, legitimate or not, accepting that this is the government, let's move on.
Because otherwise then we wouldn't have moved on.
Handshake, we agree. What we are saying, the problem is what happened after the handshake. It's the framework around the handshake.
But even if a framework wasn't announced in any format that was made public, does it therefore mean that there was no framework?
No, there was a framework, the 9 questions. But the point is, those 9 questions, by the time they were generated and the manner in which they have then been executed, missed the point. Because the main point was political accountability.
That is your agenda.
According to whom? According to whom?
That is not the handshake's agenda.
At this point, for them, when they shook hands, it was to stop the turmoil that was going on in the country at that time. That was the point for them. And then to say, upon this now, what can we build? Because there was conflicts every which way. So for them, the point would have been at that point, let's bring people together, and then from there, we can build something. They needed people to stop warring. That's what they needed at that point.
And this is where there's a difference between 2007 and 2017. In 2007, because we had similar, really, the scale was different.
Indeed.
Because the scale was much higher in 2007, but similar instance where the government has violated the law and has used security apparatus to kill people and all of that. The framework then allowed stakeholders to input into the agenda. And that is why you had land reforms, electoral reforms, constitution reforms, truth and justice issues being tabled.
In 2007.
In 2007
Let's take
now.
a short break and come back, and then we shall look at exactly what was happening in 2017 and that political deal between the two leaders, because it's just the two leaders who entered into a political deal. Uhuru has told us that they spent about 7 hours in that meeting. First hour was just looking at one another and sipping tea and wondering, how am I going to start this? Let's take a short break. It's 26 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi, also broadcasting on KTN News. This is the Morning Express on KTN News. And of course, we are also online on www.spicefm.co.ke. Take a look at traffic, and then the conversation continues.